Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from Joseph Nguyen's book, Don't Believe Everything You Think. And the premise is simple, but kind of radical. What if most of our emotional pain and suffering comes from one fundamental misunderstanding about how our own minds work? Let's get into it. So, the whole book really kicks off with this one question. What if I told you that all that stress, all that anxiety you feel, it's not actually caused by your job or your relationships or your bank account? What if it's all just the result of a simple, correctable mistake in how we see things? The book argues that the answer is all about understanding that our experience of life is created from the inside out. You know, the first part of the book really frames this whole thing as a quest that pretty much every human is on. It starts with that feeling we all know, that emotional pain, and that deep, deep desire to just make it stop. But here's the key distinction. We're not talking about unavoidable pain. We're talking about that extra layer of suffering we pile on top of it ourselves. There's this ancient Buddhist analogy that just explains this perfectly. The first arrow, that's the stuff life throws at you. Getting sick, losing a job, a sudden downpour. You can't always control that. But the second arrow, well, that's our reaction. That's the anger, the resentment, the why me. The book's whole point is that this second arrow, the suffering, is totally optional. The real question is, how do we stop shooting it at ourselves? Before he landed on this big idea, the author, Joseph Nguyen, went on a journey that probably sounds pretty familiar to a lot of us. I mean, he tried everything: therapy, self-help books, meditation, changing his diet, spiritual retreats, the whole shebang. But no matter what he did, that underlying feeling of anxiety just wouldn't go away. And that's when he had this huge realization. The solution wasn't going to be another technique to practice or another habit to build. It was about a fundamental shift in understanding. He needed to see how our minds actually create our reality from the inside out. And there's a classic Zen story that just nails this idea. Okay, so the next section of the book uses this amazing Zen story called The Empty Boat to illustrate this big shift. It's such a simple story, but it perfectly reveals where all our frustration and anger really come from. So the story starts with this young monk who is just desperate to find some peace and quiet. But every single time he sits down to meditate in the monastery, something disturbs him. Somebody walks by, an animal makes a noise, the wind rattles the window, and with every little interruption, he gets more and more frustrated and angry. He's at his wit's end, so he comes up with what he thinks is a genius plan. He gets a boat, and he rows it out to the dead center of a huge, quiet lake. He figures, finally, nothing can possibly bother me out here. And for a while, he's right. It's perfect silence. He's found it. But then one afternoon, he's deep in meditation, and suddenly, bam, he feels this jolt. Another boat has bumped right into his. Instantly, all that anger and frustration just comes rushing back. He opens his eyes, totally ready to lay into whoever was so careless and ruined his perfect peace. So he gets up, ready to yell, and he looks into the other boat, and there's no one there. Not a soul. The boat is completely empty. It had just drifted across the lake on its own and happened to bump into his. And in that exact instant, all his anger just evaporates. It's gone. And this is the core insight of the whole book. Who was he actually angry at? The boat was just a thing. The anger didn't come from the boat, it came from his thoughts about some careless person. The event itself was totally neutral. The suffering was created 100% inside his own head. Now, to really, really get the lesson of that empty boat, the book makes this super important distinction. It's the difference between having thoughts and the actual act of thinking. They sound similar, but they are worlds apart. Let's break this down. A thought is described as something that just arrives. It's effortless, like a flash of insight or a random idea. It feels creative, expansive, alive. Thinking, on the other hand, is the work we do after the thought arrives. It's the judging, the analyzing, the worrying, the wrestling with it. That process is restrictive, it's stressful, and honestly, it's usually pretty destructive. And this right here is the absolute central idea. It is not the initial thought that causes us any pain. It's the act of thinking, that process of piling on judgment and fear and stories. That is the true root of all our suffering. Just like the monk, right? It wasn't the bump that made him angry. It was all his thinking about the bump. So this leads to a pretty shocking conclusion. If thinking is what causes our suffering, then positive feelings aren't created by positive thinking. Nope. Instead, the book argues that feelings like joy and peace and love are actually our natural default state. They're what's left when all our noisy, analytical thinking just quiets down for a minute. Okay, let's try the thought experiment from the book right now. Just for a second, I want you to bring to mind a specific memory where you felt completely, purely happy, or totally at peace, or just filled with love. Maybe it was watching an incredible sunset, or holding a baby, or just laughing so hard with a friend. Really try to tap into that feeling. All right, you got it? Now here is the crucial question. In that peak moment of joy, how much were you actively thinking? How much were you analyzing or judging or planning? For pretty much everyone, the answer is not at all. In our happiest moments, our minds are quiet. We're just there, in the experience. The good feeling comes first, way before any thought about it. And this perfectly illustrates what the book calls the thought-o-meter. It's so simple. The intensity of our bad feelings is directly tied to the amount of thinking we're doing. High thinking equals high stress. Low thinking equals low stress. It's that direct. When our mental engine is revving like crazy, we feel awful. When it's just idling peacefully, we feel great. This is really the ultimate takeaway, the mic drop moment of the book. We spend so much time and energy trying to wrestle our negative thoughts into positive ones. But the secret is that our natural state of peace is always there, just waiting underneath all that noise. The problem isn't what we're thinking, but simply that we are lost in the storm of thinking itself. So, what's the path forward then? The final part of the book makes it clear. It's not about fighting your thoughts or trying to control them. It's just about recognizing the difference between a thought popping up and the destructive process of getting lost thinking about it. The goal is to just let thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky without getting swept away by them. And this quote just sums the whole thing up perfectly. Peace isn't something you have to build or achieve or work for. It's our factory setting. It's always right here, just on the other side of our own thinking. The question the book leaves us with is a powerful one. Can we start to notice the empty boats in our own lives and just let the thinking drift on by?